what I want to talk about today, some of the topics that have come up over the last week in classes, lectures, and on the radio show this week. And again, I want to give a thanks to Brother Panic for coming on the show this past Thursday night. Also want to give shout outs to my two brothers, Asar Gidi and Brother Ravana Noon. Also thank Dr. Jewel Pukram for coming on the show. She did a phenomenal class on melanin and brain power. Talked a little bit about that on the last class, and sent some healing, love, and energy out to Dr. Delbert Blair, who's recovering from foot surgery. So what we want to talk about this week is let's discuss the master within. We kind of want to stay on these metaphysical topics, these alchemy topics, dealing with spirituality and self-transformation, which is key. All right. When seeking a master, we'll talk first that whole concept. You've always seen over history and through time and through movies, whether it's martial arts movies or stories on spirituality, the student's always seeking the great master. And the master's job is basically to teach the student that they are a master, and the master resides within. So the master you're actually looking for is yourself. You just need to be raised up to the reality of who and what that master is, or get to know the true master within, I should say. When one, as we've been talking about, goes outside themselves, per se, and is looking for guidance outside of themselves, they will never come to the divine reality of what real spiritual consciousness is. Alright, so I'm going to go over some information that I put here together, and then we're going to build on it, okay? The master within. So much has been written about human duality and the division about consciousness into two fields or modes of expression, the outer self and the inner self. That many earnest seekers for light and truth on this matter are perplexed by numerous terms used by various writers and teachers. Now, what this is talking about here, some people on their quest for spirituality, knowledge, and information. Now, you definitely got to research, you definitely got to study. And I want to also talk about, to tap into that master within, you have to do the spiritual work, okay? Which it literally involves doing work on all different levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. All that work needs to be done, okay? On that path to study and research, there's so much stuff out there, is what they're saying. One can become overwhelmed and overloaded, especially people on the beginning of the spiritual path. They can get overwhelmed to the point not sure which direction can go. Now, this is a dangerous point when somebody's making, I don't want to say a dangerous point. It's a very delicate point. When somebody's at that beginning stages of spiritually awakening, going into a higher level of spiritual consciousness, this could be the make or the break point. This is where that soul is either resurrected and that individual's consciousness evolutes to a higher state, or adverse forces or lower energy forces seep in and grab that individual and can take them off the path. When one is first in the beginning stages of their spiritual journey, trying to perfect their being and contact that master within, you have to be careful not to get caught up in a lot of bullshit, because it can happen. You'll find out when you become spiritually open, you'll start running into a whole bunch of things, a whole different level of things. You will run into different people, different various doctrines and cultures. They have to be pertinent to your spiritual growth. Be careful of individuals when you're on your journey that are constantly coming up with some scam or hustle that involves money. I keep telling people, watch out for this. It doesn't mean you can't invest in your spirituality. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, individuals should have a consistent track record. If that individual is constantly coming to you and requiring money, and there's no results, then that right there, speaks for itself. So be careful in those beginning stages of your spiritual journey, not to get taken off the path, because it can be overwhelming. This is what this is talking about. So you gotta be intelligent enough to decipher what applies to you and what doesn't, and what's going to work for you, at this time, and what will not work for you. Meaning, very simple. There's some people that jump ahead of the game sometimes and indulge in things that they may not be ready for. And I only say may not be ready for because they may not have enough knowledge. I'm not a firm believer in, using scare tactics to shy people away of not messing with this and that, because your spirit will tell you what to indulge in and what not to. The key is, when dealing with the master within, you have to trust the inner self. If you don't, and you go against that inner voice, you go against that natural instinct or that divine being that resides within, and listen to outside external forces, that's when you're going to get yourself jacked up. Alright, let's continue on. Assume for the moment that human consciousness is dual in its expression, and there is evidence of a deeper and more retired consciousness called the inner self, which we were just talking about. In contradistinction to the materially expressive outer self, we find that this inner consciousness is often personalized by various authorities and generally referred to as the master within, which what we're talking about tonight. However, other popular and descriptive terms are still small voice, the conscience. These are all different terms. The subliminal self, the divine self, some refer to it as the Christ consciousness, the subjective self, the ego, the spiritual self, the astral self, the cosmic self, and so forth. The different terminologies for that master within, that inner being. This very terminology is a definite attempt to make an entity of this inner mode of consciousness instead of viewing it as but a half phase of the single consciousness in a human being. There's also the definite attempt through this terminology to intimate this special and almost isolated inner consciousness is a divine or spiritual or subliminal form of personality, quite distinct in every essential essential nature from that of the so-called self. By the law of the opposites, the outer self-world would have to be classified as distinctively materialistic, earthly, mundane, and mortal. The emphasis upon the spiritual or divine nature of the inner self implies that the outer self is very much at a disadvantage in those qualities which make for goodness and the higher evolution of the individual. So, that balancement factor. When one, again, as it's saying here, if you completely reside on external forces to guide your consciousness and your spiritual evolution, you're going to fall to the wayside. And this is, again, which would simply explain why religions don't work. Whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or any subsect of it, it's pointless, it's complete garbage, because everything about those religions takes you away from the master within and guides you to external spook forces. And I want to stress spook forces, because you can't prove to any of those entities that they claim, Jesus, for an example. I don't want to get too heavy into the religion thing. I simply tell them there's a million pictures of Jesus circulating in the world today. Nobody even knows who is what is who, what looked like who, etc. Chaos and confusion. It takes you to spook and spirit forces that you can't confirm exist. So you're looking to tap into some spiritual energy that exists outside yourself, which is against the very essence of the spiritual laws that govern humanity. Totally against it. Okay? You can't go outside yourself to understand self. Let me say that again. As simplistic as that sounds, I don't think people understand that. You can't go outside yourself to understand yourself. And what religion does is distract you by its holy books, its rules, its laws, because it's constantly got you doing external things where you never have time to attune with that inner master through meditation, through raising your vibration and frequencies up by way of astral projection, remote viewing, which we'll, if we can get into that a little bit in this class, we will. So you don't have any time to do spiritual work. You're constantly going to church, reading from the Bible, following all these different customs and holidays and traditions throughout the year, you reading and praying. So you're constantly talking and doing things, and there's no listening. Okay, and I've said before, any great master, any great sage, any great avatar never received a revelation while they were talking. They always received it while in a state of quietude or meditation. So the very principles of these core religions of monotheism take you away from true consciousness and spirituality. And that's done intentionally, because if you sat and reflected or contemplated on the real meaning of your existence, you would start to slowly but surely drift away from religious faith and belief. They don't want you to know that. They don't want you to raise yourself up to the realization of that. Okay, let's talk about the human soul now for in the next part here. What we're going to do is break down dealing with the master within. If we can get to it all in this post, the human soul, contemplating the soul, as we just talked about, maybe build a little bit on reincarnation, and get into those things, because this all deals with the master within. Well, I'll talk about the reincarnation part when we get to that. I don't want to get off. Alright. Excuse me. The human soul. It is no wonder that this very old belief regarding the duality of our consciousness and the spiritual nature of one phase of it, or one half of it, should have found its way into the doctrines and fundamental postulations of various ancient and modern religions. It has been argued that the belief in the existence of a human soul, or a spiritual essence of an intangible nature, preceded the belief of the duality of the human consciousness. It was supposedly an explanation of the function of the soul that the idea of secondary personality or form of consciousness was developed as an evidence of the existence of a soul in humankind. In other words, some schools of thought have claimed that while the idea of a human soul was acceptable from a purely religious or theological point of view, the general argument against its acceptance as fact was that this soul did not give any evidence of itself, and was therefore a purely theoretical or hypothetical assumption. There being some evidence, however, of a duality of consciousness in human beings, noted even by the earliest thinkers along religious or psychological lines, it was easy to argue that the manifestations of the so-called secondary self were those of the soul, because the secondary self and the soul were identical. Opposing this was a school of thought which contended that the secondary self was merely a phase of the human consciousness or human personality, which of itself was purely worldly or a mortal attribute of all living earthly things, and that the manifestations of the secondary half of human consciousness were to be studied from the purely psychological viewpoint rather than from the religious viewpoint. Still, other schools of thought have argued that there is no evidence of any human soul, that all of the so-called mysterious and spiritual emotions and phases of human consciousness were purely the result of the mechanics of consciousness, and that people were after all conscious beings of wholly material nature with no evidence of any spirituality in or around them. Alright, so let's put this shit into perspective. Okay? Many people have, as it just stated there, in many different schools of thoughts, philosophies, doctrines have given their breakdown or their interpretation of what a soul is. Okay? First we have to separate soul and spirit. They're two different things. Spirit are the emotions reflected from the soul. Soul, let's go back into melanin now real quick. When dealing with brain melanin, because remember, in some metaphysical schools of thought, okay, when dealing with the psychological or the mental aspect of what a soul is, we have to connect the brain, the functioning of the mind. Because when one loses their mind, okay, that's what it really means when it says you lose your soul. Let me stress that. Because when you lose the capacity of consciousness, and I'm going to do a post on a sound mind, sound body, sound being, because first of all, you have to clean yourself up physically before you can link yourself up spiritually. And we talked a little bit about that on previous classes. So you can't be plagued down and bogged down by a bunch of physical ailments. And I'm not just talking about physical sicknesses. We're talking about mental problems that lead to physical illnesses. But anyway, not to reverberate or get off the point. What it really means, again, when you lose your soul, it really means when you lose your mind, you lose your soul, because your mind connects you to everything in the universe. The powers that be, the adverse forces that we deal with on a daily basis know this. So there's a targeted propaganda, there's a targeted agenda to screw with people's minds and consciousness. More so now in this day and time than ever. And if you've been listening to the radio show, when we've been talking about periodically over the last several months, all the different examples for all the different things that are going on in the news. These things are done intentionally to get a reaction out of you. All the other changes that are going on the planet. There's stuff going on we see in the news, and there's a lot of stuff going on that's affecting spiritual consciousness, that's affecting nature, that's affecting our planet that we don't see, and we don't know what's going on. Good and bad. There's people that constantly send out energy for the healing, attunement, and balancement of the planet, and then there's those that are here to destroy and break down people. But there's a conscious agenda to mess with people's minds, to make them go out of their minds, to destroy their reasoning, to destroy their way of thinking. And they do this through various forms of propaganda, through entertainment, through movies, through TVs, through lifestyles, through certain way they set up societies and job structures, etc. Constantly pressed into a situation where you're basically fending and surviving for your life. A constant state of stress, more so now, because there's so many things that are happening on the planet. There's so many things that's going on in our country and our government. All these things are done intentionally. Okay. That coupled with everyday life's stresses, and this is why I said, I believe I talked about this. I'm not sure if it was doing classes throughout the week in the radio show. Can't remember where I said it. It might have been last week here on YouTube, or I might have said it on the radio show last Thursday. Not sure. This is why money, okay, and I want to stress this, this is why money is needed only for balancement purposes. When your sole purpose in life is just to seek money, then you're not a true spiritual mystic or an intelligent divine being. But somebody that's consciousness and awake should not be suffering or be broke. I keep telling people that. When you petition the cosmic consciousness, the divine intelligence, your ancestors, whatever terminology you need to get you through the day, you should just petition for what you need. Any great person that's locked in and tuned in spiritually and makes that connection with the divine consciousness is never left at a disadvantage. People have to put in the work to access that. This is what people don't understand. And that's why I say you could read 1,000,000 books. And I've known people in my 20-plus years doing this, okay? 20-plus years doing this, traveling to many different places all over the world and in the country, okay? They've read millions of books, okay? They've read books on every topic above and beyond the sun. They've read books on history, African history. They've read books on Egyptology. They've read books on the great Hindu and Indian masters. They've read Native American culture. They've read ancestral magic books. The list goes on and on and on and on. Myself included can make that claim, and I'm sure a bunch of people watching these videos can make that claim. But here's where the problem comes in. But how many people consistently can apply the information that they're reading? Let me say that shit again, because I run into some characters, man. You know, they're spitting all this knowledge. They sound good on the outside, but they're not a living example of the information that they're teaching, which further confirms they're not in tune with the master within. Okay? If they were in tune with their master within, it would reflect in their example. Okay? So if you're reading all these books, you're studying all this information, you're absorbing all this knowledge, but you can't put it into practice, basically what you're doing is wasting your time. That's basically what you're doing. Now, I've always said the solution for us to be a successful person, the solution for us is being able to work our ancestral magic and get the forces of nature to work for us. It's that simple. When you attack the problem on the physical level first, you will fail every time. There will never be any change. Now, this is the problem when you look throughout the conscious community, and I've talked about this many different times. People want to always focus on the physical. They're always focused on what the white man has done to them, / the devil. It's always about we have to destroy the white man or the devil. Blah, blah, blah. Well, stop talking about the shit and focusing on it and sending energy to it, because by doing that, you're giving more life to it. It's as easy as, from a spiritual perspective, to stop giving it life and energy. And again, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not changing the history that has taken place. But when consciousness is evolving on a higher level, we can approach this now from a different level. This is not slave days back at that time, where we were in a different existence. The conditions were different. The things that governed those times were different. Now we have a different spiritual artillery or weapons at our disposal that they can't fuck with. Because back then, there was a concentrated effort to separate us. Okay? And when you look at the history of slavery, or you look at the Willie Lynch papers, one of the key tactics that's used to keep melanated people down is the tactic of separation. I'm going to quote something that we talked about on a show Thursday night, something that Brother Panic talked about. And the show that we did, if you didn't get a chance to check it out, well, I'm going to tell you this shit, pack a lunch and a couple bottles of water when you listen to it, because that show is 5 hours long. Anytime we do a show with Brother Panic, it goes for a while. And we would have probably kept going, but we got kicked off the internet radio. Our time slot ran out. They 5 hours maxed us. So that's a show. If you go on the archives on the Mother Nubia Google page, where I archive all the Awakening Universal Minds radio shows, that you have access to that show. And you can go straight to the website too on talkshoe.com. But we talked about a tactic that's used to fuck with melanated people's minds. And I wanna use the example so you can understand how this fucks with the conscious and the psyche. Okay? When dealing with slavery or Willie Lynch, the tactic of separation is an effective tool. Now, we were talking about hip-hop culture. We were talking about at a point in time when hip-hop culture first came out. Okay? Melanated people saw a representation of themselves and the cities and where they grew up, and when they saw somebody from where they were, it was a representation and a reflection of them. But here was the problem. When we started to become exposed to other coasts and other states, we then became aware of the things they were doing there. We didn't know at the time. We didn't even know, there was people per se in Cali doing this, and people down south doing this, and people on the East Coast doing this, when it came to the culture, until we interreacted and became aware. And there was a concentrated effort to make sure we weren't aware, because when dealing with the hip-hop culture, and I don't want to change this into a music thing, we could do that another time, each region had its own style. We weren't made aware of it until we interreacted and became educated on it. That was used as an example to show one of the tactics they did, and they did it tribally too. When melanated people were enslaved, there's one thing that they made sure they did. They made sure there wasn't an interreaction, and they knew who to separate, when, where, and how. But we were always able to communicate through the drum. That was part of one of the tools of accessing the masters within. When we dealt with the doctrine of rhythm, we dealt with vibration, and we dealt with the higher senses, we were able to communicate without speaking a word. This is dealing now with the spiritual. This is why I'm saying if we attack this on the spiritual level, a lot of the issues that we're trying to resolve would actually fall into place, and we'd be able to overcome a lot of these obstacles that we're actually self-creating, whether we're aware of it or not. Now, the problem again is people are focusing too much on the physical. They're becoming reactive instead of proactive. Give you an example. Okay, if you're listening and following and you got it, good to you. If you're listening and you're following, you're lost a little bit. You may not understand where I'm going with this or what I'm trying to talk about. Real simple. Let's use all of these, since the hot topic on the news is all of these police shootings, these so-called racial incidences, going back Now, we can go back to Rodney King, we can go back to civil rights movement, we can go back, Marcus Garvey, we can go back and bring it up to recently present day with Trayvon Martin, to all these other police shootings, till now. How we could, very simply, turn the tables and the energy. They want you to react and go out there physically, like I said. You can march all you want. You can get Reverend Coon Sharpton and what's the other one? Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Coon Coalition, as I like to call them, who only come out when it's a black and white issue, but they never speak out on black crime. And they never go into black neighborhoods when young black men are getting shot and protesting black on black crime. Because like I said before on previous classes, there's no money in that shit. When it's black and white, there's dollars to be made, and that's just the reality. I don't give a shit if anybody agrees with that or not. And it's most of these old wannabe militant Negroes that get upset when I say that, because they're so caught up in the physical emotion of race and the whole black power thing, that it's clouded their way of thinking. And a lot of these revolutionaries are illusionaries because they don't have the resources to fight any type of physical revolution. It's comical. Well, anyway, that's a whole nother story. I don't want to tap into that. Okay? If, for an example, for us to balance things out in our favor when we're being attacked like that, if we were to get together, for an example, and work our ancestral magic, like I said earlier, and have the forces of nature working for us by way of mantras, different rituals and ceremonies, different meditation techniques, different visualizations, remote viewing, astral a list can go on, a whole list, scrying, a whole list of spiritual techniques we can use by tapping into those magical forces of nature, which connect us to our ancestors. We would be able to change the whole grid. Now, I'm saying that because your melanin, and I'm going to quote something Dr. Jewel Pookrum said, your melanin is a manifestation of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you're constantly drawing energy and sending out energy. If we knew that science and tapped into the divine consciousness of the mind, that's why I say once you lose your mind, you lose your soul. That's what it means when it says you lose your soul. It's not no religious shit that some fucking devil comes, with a pitchfork and sucks your soul out of you. You're seeing all these fictitious sci-fi movies and horror movies, and they create this fictive. That's not what the shit is talking about. This is purely metaphysical. This is dealing with the higher sciences. It means to lose your fucking mind, and they know that. They want you to lose your goddamn mind, because if you lose your mind, they got your soul. So they are attacking your mind on a conscious level, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They know this, okay? And they have to make sure, it's very important, they have to make sure you're being indoctrinated 24 hours a day, okay? 7 days a week. And they do this by way of music, movies, education, food, list goes on and on and on. There's ways and mind techniques to control it. So if we tapped into the higher divine consciousness of our ancestors and worked our magic, things would automatically start falling into place. Not on no hocus pocus bullshit level. Things would start to fall in place on the physical. And then a physical revolution can take place. You can't start with the physical and get a bunch of uneducated, ignorant bastards together and try to go to war. That doesn't work. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's why I've said for years, stay away from them fucking people that are telling you, groups such as the Nation of Islam, the New Black Panther Party, that's creating the illusion in your mind that you're going to pick up some weapons and fight this goddamn devil called the white man. Fight this country that controls artillery of nuclear missiles and high-tech weapons, etc., if you're not going to attack it first from the spirits. And now remember, a true metaphysicist, a physician knows that the root of all problems starts with the spiritual. I keep telling everybody that. If you don't understand that principle and attack it from that level, when any situation arises, you have to petition the spiritual first. Okay? And not in no hocus pocus bullshit way. Okay? It works the same way to be successful. It doesn't work where you can go before your ancestral shrine and petition to be a millionaire. You're stupid. People that are doing work just for riches, you will fail all the time. When you don't seek balancement, and you're not sincere in your spiritual work, you will fail all the time. So if you're not putting in the work, no results will come about it. If you're just that Negro that's reading a million books all the time, then you're just a walking encyclopedia. I've said that several times before. Okay? You're just somebody with a lot of information, but you're pretty much a waste of space because you're not applying any of that information. Okay? So, again, I want to grasp the concept. I want you to grasp the concept of that. That's why it's important to be in sound mind and sound body, because if you lose your mind, you lose your soul. And I want you to meditate and focus on that. So now we're not dealing just anymore where there was a forced physical slavery years back. We're dealing now with mental slavery, which is a tougher war because you're fighting a war you can't see until you open up that pineal gland, okay, or that root chakra, okay, so you can be made aware. Because once that root chakra is functioning correctly, or that pineal gland, you are now opened yourself up to a higher level of consciousness and awareness. Now, the mistake a lot of people make in dealing with chakra work, for an example, they try to focus on the crown chakra. You can't do that. It doesn't work like that. You can't start and start doing work on your crown chakra when your root chakra, which is the pineal gland, isn't functioning at its correct capacity. It doesn't work like that. Any great metaphysicist, alchemist, scientist knows that is impossible to do. But this is, you got. That's why I said earlier, if you remember in the beginning of this class, I said, when you're on that journey and you're in that transition stage from coming out of a state of mental ignorance and coming into spiritual consciousness, you're a ripe soul for the picking, good and bad. So you can be a magnet for all types of individuals to come into your path, positive and negative. And be careful at that point, because you're going to have a lot of crazy motherfuckers that come to you because they see you're ripe for the pickings. Some see dollar signs, unfortunately, and I'm going to keep it real, because I'm not going to paint the picture in dealing with this that everything is roses and peaches and cream. But just like anything in life, whether it's a church, a sports team, your job, your family, you always got assholes in all those groups. And that's just a reality. And once you understand that, you're setting yourself up not to fail. The problem that happens is people set themselves up for failure because they create illusions around things that they do on a daily basis. Marriages fail because people don't prepare, like we talked about last week, choosing the right relationship. People don't prepare for the relationship as a whole. They look too forward ahead and create a higher expectation that they can't fulfill in the now. And a true metaphysician lives in the now. Okay? Let me say that again. A true metaphysician lives in the now. They're not worried about yesterday, because yesterday is a thing of the past. Okay? They're not worried about tomorrow because they're not sure if tomorrow will ever come. But it's called the present because it's a gift. Let me say that again. It's called the present because it's a gift, because you have that gift now. And the only reality is the present. Because bottom line is this: you're not guaranteed to get up tomorrow morning. You don't know that for sure. Let me show you how fucked up the mind operates and how messed up they got your way of thinking. 99.9% of people go to sleep at night and think they're guaranteed to rise the next day physically. And there's no guarantee of that. Okay? There's no guarantee that tomorrow ever comes. The only thing that is real is right now. Now, when dealing with the matrix system of thought, when dealing with the psychological aspect of it, you really, if you're asleep, you really don't know if everything up to this very point of your existence is an illusion. You don't know if you're seeing this through somebody else's eyes, your existence. You could be in somebody else's dream seeing your existence. I know that sounds crazy, but it only becomes a reality to you when you're controlling the experiment. That's why I've said that. You've heard me say that a bunch of times. You're either part of the experiment or you're controlling the experiment. I don't think people understand what it means when that statement is being said. It's not being said just to make it sound good. That's not why the statement is being made. The statement is to take you to a higher level of thought and consciousness. And it all starts in the mind. And again, to go back and quote something that Dr. Jewel Pookrum said, if melanin's origin begins in the mind, we're dealing with the neuromelanin, and melanin is the electromagnetic spectrum that draws in and intakes energy and lets out energy. It's basically our spiritual conductor when influxing this energy and sending this energy out. That's a powerful system right there in itself. But now, how do we get our melanin to work for us as opposed against us? It starts with the thought process. They know this. So they have to attack you mentally on all levels. Now, you come to this realization, as we said, by contacting the master within, getting the answers to the questions you need, simply going into, for an example, give you one example, because there's many different techniques and things you can do. When going in through meditation and making contact with your DNA ancestors, it's as simple as getting to that realm where you are able to access many different spiritual realms where your ancestors reside and commune with them. Okay? Time travel. So this shit might sound bizarre to some people that are not familiar with it. To those that are on that path, it's just a normal everyday occurrence. We are able to travel at any point in time, whether we want to go back in time, whether we want to visit other realms. I'm not going to get too deep into that now. When you discipline yourself, you're able to do that, and you know now your stay here is temporary. I'm talking about on the earthly realm. Now, we haven't even touched on reincarnation, which I don't think we're going to have time to get into that tonight. I'm going to probably continue that in the next post, because this is kind of leading into the reincarnation aspect of it. You will find out when you're able to tap in and open those portholes to dimensions of other existences, and you're able to time travel, okay, you have a whole, I can't even put a tag on it. The access to consciousness that you have is unlimited. That you can't even measure it. You know that this physical body is just a vehicle that's being used to subside on this earthly realm. And the spirit and the ancestors will guide you to the point you need to be. That's when you're controlling the experiment. But when you're at the disposal and the will of others, then you're being controlled constantly. These are your reactionary people that are constantly reacting off a raw, pure emotion. And one of the tactics that they're using now, that they were using heavy back during the civil rights movement, they're trying to incite all these racial issues. Okay, and it's going to get worse. But it's only going to get worse for those that are part of the experiment. Those of us that are locked in spiritually, it has no effect on us. It's like a blip in time and we just keep moving. Because there's a higher purpose for those that are here, for the very paradigm shift or the energy shift of this planet. And this is why you hear all the great teachers of this day and time, your Dr. Phil Valentine's, your Dr. Delbert Blair's, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, all have been preparing us for the last 20 plus years for this great shift in consciousness. Now, those that are making the transition and are aware are going along with it. And that's why you heard me saying some older posts several months back, you know, when you're moving and changing with nature, things fall into place. But when you're going against nature and your ancestors, you'll find these are the individuals that are constantly having problems, issues, and they never seem to grow consistently on a spiritual level. That's what that's talking about. So it's a lot to put in perspective. You only understand this, and we didn't even talk about, like I said, reincarnation. Because reincarnation is important. I'll tap a little bit into it real quick. Reincarnation is important because when you go into your periods of contemplation / meditation, and you raise yourself up to the realization of your previous existences, it will help you to understand the cosmic and the karmic debt that you're fulfilling in your present existence. Alright? You will know why you're going through what you're going through, and then you will get the solutions and know how to deal with it, because you are here for a reason right now. You may not understand it, and you may not overstand it, you may not understand it. You have to raise yourself up to the realization of that reality. Nobody can tell you that. That's what I keep telling people. You can't read it in a book anywhere. The books, the teachings, these are just tools to enhance what already exists within us. This is why we do what we do. To awaken people, to assist them and wake them back up to the reality, to the divine self of the master within, to who and what they really are. Okay? So the reading of the books, listening to somebody such as myself or any other teacher or any other guide or aide or elder that might be in your life is okay. It's fine. It's all good. But it can only get you to a certain point, because at some point you have to tap in to the master within. Because if you don't tap into that divine deity that exists within you, that master, you'll never reach your full potential. It's that simple. Now again, easier said than done, because there's a lot of things that have to be done to get to that point, and that's where putting in the work comes in. None of it can be done with putting in the work. And let me give you some basic examples, if you're not, for those that might be real new to this and you're not sure, what do I mean? Some very basic tools: consistent meditations, mantras and chanting, doing certain rituals, which I'm not going to get into detail here. There's certain magic and ancestral rituals can be done individually or ritualistically in a group. And the purpose of the ritual is because the rituals transform. It changes the energy. For an example, if you do a group chanting session and you take certain mantras or chants and you chant them in unison, in vibration, in rhythm, the very sound, vibration, rhythm, and frequencies of those mantras and chants literally affect the planet on so many different levels in a positive aspect. It changes the vibration. It changes the energy. Those are just some basic examples. These are the things they don't want us to do, and these are the things that individuals are programmed when they approach them. For an example, what I'm saying now, okay, if a religious person stumbles across this video and hears me talking the way I'm talking now, they're already programmed to think that what I'm talking about is devil worship, because they're stupid. They've already been pre-programmed that I'm talking about witchcraft, black magic. And see the term? They always got to take the spiritual sciences that we practice, that predated religion, and they made sure when they take you in that ignorant mind state of religious faith and belief, they've already pre-programmed you against what's against them. You understand that? So somebody that might stumble across this video and hear the things I've been talking about for the last hour, automatically their subconscious is programmed to go off and say, that motherfucker's evil. He's talking about devil worship and black magic, etc., etc. Okay? That's part of the program process of the mind. That's why I said if you lose your mind, you lose your soul. So one step of that process is what we call prepping. It's a technique. It's a mind control technique. It's just going to sound funny. It's the same thing where you have these spiritual conscious pimps that I like to talk about that use consciousness and doctrine and information to get in females' pants. Let's be real. And if a female that may be in consciousness reads something in a book somewhere or goes to a lecture and gets something in a class, some Negro that's trying to get into her pants will give his interpretation and breakdown on it after she's already figured it out. But he has to add his flavor to it, because that's part of his prep stages, as I like to call it, indoctrination, not indoctrination. That gets into a whole other story. These are all techniques. I can go on and on and on and on and on, because it filters out to many different levels on the physical, the mental, the spiritual, relationships, etc. It goes into a broader spectrum You have to be aware of that, because when you're conscious of this energy, and that's all it is energy. I'm going to be straight up with you. You got to know how to take that energy and transform it and make it work for you. It's that simple. That's why if you understand that metaphysical concept, you will never ever struggle. You will never ever be left without. Now, don't confuse that with, I'm not saying being a millionaire, because a true mystic knows, a true spiritually conscious person knows that they will never ever be a millionaire, billionaire in what we know as that status today, but they do know that they will never ever be without. And I can only speak for myself and my experiences and others that I know in the same situation. I don't worry about 90% of the things that people worry about on a daily basis. People that are constantly worrying about how they're going to pay that next bill. People that are constantly worried about planning for my retirement, for an example. See, your mind focuses on the wrong things, okay? Your energy is not in the right place, because the very fact that you're constantly thinking about those things and worrying about them is also awakening you to the fact that there's some type of mental and spiritual imbalancement that you're fighting too. It's the same reason why most people get illnesses or sicknesses. It could be something as minor as a cold or a flu, because there's a spiritual disconnect there. But anyway, that's a whole other topic in itself. But I'm teaching you, once you get in tune with the master within, you will see everything around you balance itself out on all levels, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and of course, the last aspect it trickles down to is physically. Now, if we apply these concepts, now this is why on some of the very first posts, and I'm going to revisit it again soon in the future, why I strictly did some thorough breakdowns on the 7 principles of Tahuti. And I recommend anybody to go study and master that as one of the first things they can do if they really want to understand consciousness and their existence and how the laws of the universe works and all the things that I've been talking about tonight. That is a great tool or roadmap or guidance that you can use to elevate you on your spiritual journey. Okay? Because a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about deals with the 7 principles of Tahuti, the doctrine of rhythm, the doctrine of polarity, the doctrine of the mind. All is the mind. The mind is all. It's the first principle. Okay? So it starts here. Don't let nobody shit you. To tap into the master within is to master the mind. Don't let nobody shit you. All that stuff that you've been indoctrinated with for years is to distract you of the reality of what this is really about. There is, let me say this, man, okay? People are going to fucking find out the hard way. If you believe that there's some Jesus, okay, whether you believe he's some hippie with long hair, some white hippie with long hair wearing a diaper, whether you believe he's black, that doesn't make it any better. So to all these wannabe spiritual Afro-Christian Negroes that think by making Jesus black that makes it more spiritual, some of y'all are worse than some of these white Christians. Okay, if you think that there's an Allah or there's a Yahweh, and if you really believe in your mind that some spook spirit force is going to come out of the sky and make everything better for you, man, you're in some deep fucking trouble. That's all I can tell you, because you've bought into the illusion. They sold you, the piece of the illusionary pie, as I like to call it. I got news for you. If you're here now, your grandmother, your mother, your great-great-grandparents, some of them are here. The ones that have gone, they were talking about Jesus was coming. They're long dead and gone. Guess what? You're going to be long dead and gone, and they're still going to be talking about Jesus is coming. Okay? That's part of the mind fuck and the mind control to steal your soul. Okay? To always constantly put you under the illusion that something is coming for you, when the only thing you need coming for you is already here, which is you. But they don't want you to know that. So they teach you to go outside of yourself. So if you really think in your mind that there is something coming to save you, and if you really believe in your mind, if you go to church consistently on a weekly basis, pay your tithes, and listen to Reverend Coon and Reverend Porkchop, that you're going to have some place called heaven that you can't even prove exists, man, you're going to have problems. And I can confidently sit here and tell you, if you really studied and did the research, you would find out that that is nothing but mythology, fables, and bullshit taken from other religions, cultures, and doctrines. It's that simple. And again, I don't want to get into it. That applies to any of those monotheistic religions, because the hardest person to talk to is a religious person, because they're stupid and they're ignorant and they think that they know everything. Now, I've made this statement. I'm past getting into religious debates. I don't even talk about religion, because it's not even worth my time. It's not even worth my breath. Now, if there's somebody that's religious and sincerely wants to have a conversation, that's a different thing. I don't get into religious debates. I'm too old for that shit, number one. Number two, it's a waste of time and energy. But again, that God that you're looking for, that deity that you're trying to find, resides within. Alright, I'm going to stop there. Just to make a few announcements real quick. Again, tune into the show, Awakening Universal Minds, this Thursday night, 9 o'clock. Still, I will find out either Monday or Tuesday to see if Dr. Blair is fully recovered. If he is, we will have him on the show Wednesday night, June 11th. I'm sorry, Thursday night. Get my days all screwed up. Thursday night. We even talk about time. When you're locked in a zone spiritually, time is not even a factor. You're not even conscious of dates and times. That's a whole other story. But Thursday, June 11th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If Dr. Blair is fully back to capacity, we'll have him on the show Thursday night, June 11th, 9 p.m. If not, myself, Brother Ravana Noon, and Asar Gidi, we will come up with a topic and do an interesting show. Trust me, it'll be good. June 18th, we'll have Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum on the show. And June 25th, we have Sister Vera Courtney coming back on the show. And then we have a whole topic of shows that we're going to do personally in the month of July and moving forward. But we'll talk about that later down the road. That's upcoming. Next week, I think it's Saturday, June 13th. There's a Saturday night class / lecture I'll be doing in Miami Gardens at Sophia's Garden of Ma'at. That is going to be on Saturday, June 13th. Starts at 7:30 p.m. I believe, 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Mission is free. We don't charge. I will be there myself personally with tons of books and information to purchase and buy to study. There'll be other vendors there. So we just ask support the vendors. That's your way of showing your appreciation. And if you're in the South Florida area, come out. If you want to come from another area, come out. Whatever. But I will be there personally that night. So if anybody wants to come out, support that. That'll be Saturday, June 13th, 7:30, 8 o'clock p.m. You can email me for the exact information and directions. Again, at khnum19@gmail.com. Also, for the updates on the show, I post them here on YouTube, this page here, and on the Mother Nubia Google page. You can find the latest information on the radio show and the things that we're doing. So, come out and support those events. Whatever topic we decide to do next week, like I told you, I just go with the flow. I don't really plan anything. Wherever the spirits and the ancestors take us, that is where we will go. And I think that's about it for now. So this is your brother Beniti Amun-Re saying Hotep, and I will see you on the next post / next class. Peace.